First of all, pride. It is the most deadly of the deadly sins. That's why it's number one. It's the capital sin, from the Latin caput, right, meaning head. It's the head sin from which everything else flows. Pride is the problem. You know, as Catholics, when we talk about sin or vice, what do we think of first? Probably sexual sin, right? Lust. When in fact, according to Dante, who was one of the great articulators of the deadly sins, lust is the least significant of the seven. Mind you, it's a deadly sin, don't get me wrong, but it's the least significant. The most significant, and all the great masters agree with him, is pride. What is pride? I want to look at it first under a theological aspect, and then if you want a more psychological aspect. What's pride theologically? It is arrogating to oneself the distinct prerogatives of God. Think now of the sin of Lucifer. Think of the sin of Adam and Eve. Arrogating to ourselves the unique prerogative of God. How is that expressed now in the beautiful language of Genesis? They grasp at the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Well, see, who alone has this distinctive and grounding knowledge of good and evil? Well, that's God. When Adam and Eve seized that prerogative for themselves, they commit this great sin of pride. Arrogating to oneself the unique prerogative of God, that's pride. Okay, so what's the real problem with pride? I'll put it now in one little phrase. It's boring. Now, why? See, when you arrogate to yourself the prerogative of God, you've turned in on yourself. St. Augustine defined it beautifully. Curvatus in se. That means caved in around oneself. I determine the meaning of my life, my projects, my plans, my intentions. Ho-hum, my little world. I'm living in this little, clean, well-lighted space of my own egotistic plans. How wonderful, by the way, when you can break out of that into what Hans Urs von Balthasar calls the theodrama. What's the theodrama? That's the drama that God is producing, that God is writing, that God is directing. You've got a role in it, but God's the producer, the director, the writer. When you surrender to that and you find your role in the theodrama, now you begin to live. See, in the prideful person, all of us are prideful people. We lock ourselves into the little narrow space of what we want. Surrender to the theodrama, and now you really begin to live. You know, in Ephesians, Paul says this. There's a power already at work in you that can do infinitely more than you can ask or imagine. I love that line. What's the power? It's the Holy Spirit. It's already at work in you, and it can do so much more than you can ask or imagine within the confines of your little ego drama. Break out. Open yourself up to the Holy Spirit. That's overcoming pride. And you see why pride is the fundamental sin, that we get locked in, curvatus in se.